Hey everyone, today we're interviewing Teddy Slack. He's a staple in the oil cleanup industry, and today we're lucky enough to find out how his expertise can help us all. Let's check it out. Welcome everyone. Today I have with me in studio Teddy Slack, and he's going to teach us how to save our deal when we're faced with an oil tank situation.
Yep.
So Ted, could you please just introduce yourself very quickly for the audience, for those of you who may not know who you are?
Sure, yeah. My name is Teddy from Simple Tank Services. So we specialize in residential oil tank services. I've been doing this pretty much my whole life. Grew up in the business. I'm fourth generation. My grandfather used to actually install oil tanks from Union, so we take out a lot of tanks that he installed. So that's how long I've been in the business. But I've gotten involved with a few other companies, but this has been my main business. Basically since I was a little kid.
So your grandfather created the market for you.
Correct.
That's
exactly.
Awesome.
Exactly. Yeah. We have his list. I mean, we have old cards of like all the houses he put it in. Like, yeah, man.
Really forward-thinking guy.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
Talk about generational.
You would be putting him in. He put two in. Now he take it out 2 a day.
That's awesome.
He put 2 in a day. So yeah, it's funny.
Well, Ted, one of the reasons we have you here today is because you've got a ton of experience and you've been in this a long time. And you've seen firsthand a lot of real estate agents lose their deals because of these oil tanks. It's a really big problem in the northern, eastern part of the country.
Yep.
So for those of you people who out there don't know what an oil tank is, homes were heated by oil for a long time up here. Can you explain the history of it?
Correct, exactly. So yeah, back in the day, I mean, they didn't have gas lines running the street. So they had oil, they either put them, most of the time back then, they would put them underground. Then they got smarter and started putting them above ground, but back then it was all underground. They figured out, there was no DEP, there was no environmental laws or rules back then, so they just throw them in the ground, they're out of sight, out of mind kind of thing. But they're steel, so eventually they're going to corrode. Today, if you were to install a tank in the ground, the manufacturer tells you it should last about 25 years under perfect conditions. So these tanks were put in the 30s and 40s, 50s.
Yeah.
So they're way past their, So they're most of them are leaking. That's the problem. Most of them have corroded and they're discharging oil into the ground.
Okay. So now what happens, because a lot of people don't even know they have one in the ground. So let's just say I'm a real estate agent, I'm doing my inspection, someone comes out and they do a test with a magnetometer to see if there's anything on the ground and he finds something.
Yep.
Then you guys come out, right? What's the steps look like?
Exactly. So if you're representing the buyer in the deal and you have a tank sweep done, you'd have a tank sweep done anywhere you buy a house in New Jersey, unless it's a new construction, there's never been any houses on that street, you don't have to do a tank sweep. But for the most part, you're going to do a tank sweep in New Jersey.
Yes.
So if you find an area of concern or an oil tank, the next step is, if it's an area of concern, because a lot of times these guys are doing tank sweeps. Well, we'll start with a lot of these guys that are doing tank sweeps don't really know what they're doing, so you got to be careful. A metal detector is $900. Anybody could buy a $900 metal detector and start an LLC for $150 and they're in business. Sure. And that's what's happening. A lot of guys are running around doing sweeps because it's $200, $250, and you can make your money back in 4 sweeps. The first week you're profitable. So the problem is though, they don't have experience pulling tanks. And what we found is, because I've even tried to hire guys to train them, but if they don't have the experience out there every day pulling oil tanks out of the ground, they don't really know where to look for the tanks, kind of, it makes it a lot harder, and so they'll find areas of concern all the time, like, oh, it's a little metal piece, then you got to dig it up. So you really want to hire a guy who's got the tank experience, somebody, who's with a tank company, who's pulled tanks for a few years at least. But yeah, the first step is to do an exploratory dig if you're not sure if it's a tank. And then if it is a tank, what we recommend, the next step, most people recommend pulling it. Oh, you got to pull it before you buy the house. I say no, don't pull the tank. Because here's the thing, if you pull the tank, let's say you're representing the buyer, I pull the tank before he buys the house. Well, the next question is well, how much is it going to cost to clean up? If it's leaking, I can't tell you at that point. I'm going to give you an open-ended contract, and that's how the industry works.
Yeah. That's
no good. You can't have an open-ended contract, so you need to know exactly what it costs. So we recommend the next step, if you find a tank, is do soil investigation. And our soil investigation is essentially, it's a lot more involved than a regular, hand boring test to find out if the tank is leaking or not.
Okay.
What ours consists of is we come out with a machine. It's called a geoprobe. It's a track rig machine. It's about $150,000 equipment. We come out there and we probe around your tank. If I find contamination, we're going to figure out how far out it traveled, how deep it is. We're going to figure out if groundwater's impacted. We're going to figure out if it's under a structure. We'll figure out if it's off-site. All this we do for $600.
Wow.
Most guys, for $600, they come out with hand boring equipment and they probe down and they try to see if it's leaking. But it's not an accurate test by hand, because a lot of times these guys come out, they only get down to 3-4 feet. They hit a rock, and then they're like, yeah, maybe they're hung over from the night before, the technician, you know what I mean? So he's like, oh, I'm going to take a sample here.
Yeah.
So he takes a sample at 3-4 feet, and you think you got an accurate test. No company will guarantee those tests. So your client spent $500-600 on a soil test thinking that it's clean. Meanwhile, they bought a house that has a leaking tank. So our equipment is capable of going down 30 feet. And all you gotta do is press a button and,
Yeah.
and it drills. You know what I mean? So it's gonna get to the proper depth. You need to
Sure.
be anywhere between 7 to 12 feet to get a proper sample. So we're very confident in our results. So when we do our soil investigation, if we tell you that it's clean, let's say I don't find any contamination, we actually back that up with a guarantee for 6 months. So if you're representing the buyer, they know within 6 months, as long as they pull it within 6 months after they close, if there's any problems whatsoever, we are going to clean it up for free, no additional charge. Also, if we find contamination, we're going to be able to delineate the soils, like I was saying, and give you give your client a fixed price. So we'll be able to say, exactly what it's going to cost before they buy that property. It's going to be $12,000 or $15,000 or $20,000, whatever the number is going to be, and that number doesn't fluctuate.
Yeah, most people can't do that, right? It's kind of like a range. They'll tell you when they pull out the tank.
And it's really the estimates that get sent out. I mean, they start anywhere from $6,000 to $8,000. I've seen those morph into $600,000. They start at $6,000, they morph into 100, 600, like crazy numbers. They all started off like that, open ended. Oh, it's $6,000. We don't, because you know what it is. They don't know how far it traveled, so it's a guessing game.
Yeah.
And when I got into this business, that's how I started. That's how I learned. I mean, that's how the industry did it. That's how I was taught. But I kept saying to myself, there's got to be a better way to do this. It's not fair to people where you just come in, you're quoting them at $8,000, and then at the end of the day, I'm handing them an invoice for $25,000. People cry. Like it's it's sad to watch it because I feel bad for them. I feel like if that was me and I was a homeowner, like I'd be devastated. I got a quote for $8,000, now you're handing me an invoice for $25,000. So I had to figure out a better way to do it, and this equipment is allowing us to do that. To really delineate the area to figure out exactly what's going on underground.
Yeah, well, the industry that you're in for a long time, it was an industry that no one really had any regulation over. Like there isn't really a set way to do it. So what you're saying was actually common practice. And I even heard that there's stories where the oil companies used to cut holes in the tank just to say, look, it was leaking. So
there's a lot of
there was
shady
so
guys.
many things. Yeah, but what you do is you set a reputation for your company and you do things that are outside of the norm.
Correct.
To create a kind of an environment where people feel safe and they feel comfortable. That way they keep coming back to you. And then real estate agents, they keep referring you because the experience they had with you is so much better. And obviously their clients always group everyone together. So if the oil tank guy takes advantage of them and the agent referred them,
it's no
then
good.
you guys are in bed together.
Exactly,
like that's the way it works.
Yeah, even tank sweeps. Like for instance, the way that it works, you hire a guy for $200 to $250 to do a tank search for your client. And they tell you that the property's free and clear. Your client buys the property, 3 years down the road, they go to, let's say, put an addition on or go to sell the property. Well, they find an oil tank, new buyer. So what do? They I got to pull it out. Now they have a $15,000 cleanup on their hand. Well, they go back to the guy they hired to do a tank sweep and say, hey, you messed up. You missed the tank.
Yeah.
Oh, there's no guarantees.
Yeah.
Sorry, you're on your own. Or if he's a real small guy, sorry, I'm going to go out of business and, start another LLC, right? So that's what happens. With us, we give a full financial guarantee. So if I come out and tell you there's no oil tanks in your property, we back that up for $250, which is basically what's going around. That's how much it costs, right? For $250, I'm giving you a full financial guarantee. If I miss a tank, I'm going to remove it for free, and I'm going to also do an environmental cleanup.
Yeah.
Groundwater, anything that's got to be cleaned up, I do it for free. For $250. Nobody's doing that.
That's insane.
We've done thousands of tank sweeps. I had to do 3 cleanups so far.
Wow, that's really good.
So we're pretty accurate, and obviously we're not just hiring anybody to do these sweeps. We have guys that are really trained that have been doing them for a long time.
Yeah, and the thing that also real estate agents have to know is that when something goes wrong and a client gets damaged in some way, they're going to sue everyone.
Correct.
So if you recommended
they're bringing you in.
They're bringing you in. Yeah, you have insurance and you're coming too.
Yep.
So that's why it's important to work with a company like yours that can guarantee it.
Exactly. You can sleep at night. You know, God forbid we miss something. Now you just come back to me, make one phone call, no problem. And I get calls all the time. Oh, you did a tank sweep for me 2 years ago. I'm selling the house, and now the new buyer hired one of these one-man bands to do a tank sweep, and they found a tank. I'm like, oh, really? You found a tank?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you know for 100% certain it's a tank? Well, it's an area concern. I'm like, all right, well, when you find out it's a tank, then you call me and I'll remove it for free and clean it up. And most of the time, it's not a tank. I mean, like I said, we've done 3 removals and cleanups out of thousands that we've done. So it's it's very accurate.
So let's go through some of the scenarios that we normally see. All right. So they find a tank. Oh, it's been sand filled. There's no problems with it. How do you combat that?
That is absolutely not the case at all. Actually, tanks that were previously filled in place we find that those were leaking more. They leak more than the ones that were actually, active. And I'll tell you why. Because think about it. If your tank is sand filled, most most likely, whoever sand filled that tank 10 years ago, 15, they did that for a reason. They didn't all of a sudden wake up one day and say, you know what, I really don't like oil. I'm going to convert to gas. Maybe a small percentage of them did. Most of them had a problem with that tank. It was taking on water, so their furnace wasn't lighting, so they had no heat. So what they do, they took it out of commission. They put a new tank above ground in the basement. So those tanks we find are leaking a lot. I mean, because they were leaking before they were filled in place. And that's what people think, well, it was inspected. Here's the problem. When you sand fill a tank, which nobody does anymore, but if you were to sand fill a tank, the way the process works is you cut a hole in the top of it, you dig down by hand, cut a hole in the top of it, you clean it out, and the town inspector comes in, looks at it with a flashlight. Inside the hole, how can you tell if it's leaking? You can't. Unless groundwater is coming up through the holes, which sometimes that does happen, but it's rare. So he's not going to be able to tell if it's leaking. It's not required by the DEP or the state to test the soil before you sand fill a tank, which is a law that I think should be put in place, but it never was. So people were just filling these tanks with sand. They were actually leaking before they filled it, and that was the problem. So that's one issue we find. Another issue is we find that maybe the tank wasn't leaking when they filled it with sand, but now when we pull it 10 years later, it's metal, it's going to rot. So it might have holes in it, which now is going to, your inspection is going to fail because your tank has holes. Even though there's no discharge in the soil, your tank is still going to fail the inspection. And the thing is, why we're different and why most guys, what they'll do in that situation is they'll call a case number. What that means is the DEP has, gets notified only when your inspection fails or when there's a visual sign of a discharge, and you get assigned a case number. So once you're assigned a case number, the price goes from $1,500 to pull a tank to minimum you're going to spend 5, 10, 15 grand to do a cleanup or an investigation. It's a huge price difference. So I get this all the time where clients will call me for a price. They're price shopping it. How much do you charge to pull at $550? Oh, it's $1,400. Oh, I got a guy who'll do it for $1,350. Okay, go with the guy for $1,350. Let me explain why price is not important. Price is the last thing that it should come into your mind when it comes to oil tanks. It's more reputation than anything because in a situation where a guy gets charged $1,350, okay, and I'm charging $1,400, in that exact situation where it's previously filled, we pull the tank, it has holes, no contamination, but holes. Well, the guy that charges $1,350, he's calling a case number. It's up to the contractor, not the home inspector, not the town inspector. That's what people get confused. They think the town inspector is the one who contacts the DEP. No, it's the contractor. It's up to the contractor. So if he decides that he wants to call a case number in because he wants to make more work out of it, he could just make a phone call. And that's all it takes is one phone call. And he gets a case number, and now it's going to cost that client thousands of dollars, where my guys are trained to come out. If there's no contamination, I'll take 2 samples of the bottom of the excavation. I don't call a case number, even though the town will tell me, oh, call a case number. And they literally tell you that on site. You need to call a case number. I said, okay, no problem. I'll take care of it. We don't call a case number until I get results from the soil.
The readings.
If the soils are clean, non-detect, there's no soil contamination at all, I go back to the town and I'll fight with the town. Here, I have sample results. There's no contamination. I'm not obligated to call the DEP. If you want to call them, go ahead. And they don't. And sometimes I actually have the DEP call the townships to literally let them know that this does not warrant a case number. And that saves clients thousands of dollars. Just that one decision. So again, it's more reputation, not price. Don't price shop it when you're pulling the tank.
Absolutely. So nowadays, it's the norm. When I got started in this business, attorneys really didn't care about oil tanks. It wasn't even an issue. Now it's like a norm. If there's a tank on a property, if they don't know if there's a tank, there's always a sweep involved. I feel like the way things are going, that in the future, even tanks that were pulled, do you feel like there's going to be a time where they're going to want samples done where 100%. The tanks were?
100%. And there's a lot of guys running around right now that are doing pulls illegally. And I know that because I get the calls after they're done. Hey, you got to help me out, dude. I didn't take a permit out. And I got the neighbors call the cops or whatever. It just happened last week. An investor. I mean, I know there's guys running around that are doing it illegally. So people are going to catch on to that. And they're going to be able to figure out, like, okay, well, this house had oil at one point. It's got gas now.
Where's the records of it?
Yeah, where's the records? Like, so, that's going to happen, definitely. We're going to be coming out and doing soil borings in areas where we think this tank should have been. It's difficult because if the tank was removed illegally, you have to have an idea of where that tank was located. If it happened 5 years ago, you're not going to see evidence of where it was pulled.
Sure.
But again, if you know what you're doing, you know where the furnace is, you could kind of have an idea. You put a couple probes in the ground, and we've done that already, where we put probes in and find that there's contamination. Tank's gone, no permit for it. There's contamination. So it does happen, and that's going to become more of a thing.
Prevalent thing, right? That's crazy. So if a client does find a tank on a property, but they don't have the money to pay for it, what can they do?
So are they selling? Is it?
Let's just say we're in the middle of a deal, because we're talking about how do we save our deal.
Yep.
If we want to save our deal, we find a tank. the real estate agent obviously can't pay for it. They may not have the ability to do so. The client may not have the ability to do so.
Yep.
How does the situation happen at that point?
One of the programs that we rolled out, we've been doing a lot lately, is so typically I'll start off with the NFA. So when you're in a deal, you usually have 60 days to close a deal, roughly, right? So by the time you get to the tank inspections and all that stuff, you're down to 40 days, 30 days. So it's on your time crunch, right? So we have a program where we can get you a no further action letter in a week and a half from the time we do the work, which is typically a 4 to 6 week process. So we can do it in a week and a half. So because of this new process that we've come up with, we'll do deals, we'll get paid at closing, because I don't have to wait 6 weeks or 8 weeks to get the deal to close. I could get it to closing in a couple of weeks, 2-3 weeks, and I get my money. So we'll get paid at closing, where the client doesn't have to put any money out of pocket. But we do require that we come in and we have to do our borings, because I need to know. I don't want to get into an open-ended situation where I start a job with no money and then all of a sudden it morphs into a $100,000 cleanup. So I have to know what I'm getting myself into. So we come out and we probe around. I give the client a fixed price. It's $15,000. They agree, and then we go through the process. We do the cleanup, and we get them an NFA in a week and a half, and we close.
And the majority of jobs are like that. They're smaller.
Yeah, the majority of them are anywhere. If you have to actually, and here's the thing: a lot of people think if your tank leaks, your only option is remediation. If a contractor tells you that's your only option, you need to run the other direction, because that is not the only option. You have options depending on the levels of the contamination. So if you take out a tank and it's leaking, our process is we take a sample of the dirtiest soil we could find, we run it to the lab, we get the results. Depending on those results, if they're under a certain level, I can return to the property and grab like 6 more samples. That's what's required with the geologist's oversight, and I could write a report. Something like that, you're looking at like $4,500.
Okay.
As opposed to a remediation, a small one, you're looking at $9,500.
Okay.
So it's essentially half the price,
That's
really,
a big
right?
difference,
So it's a huge savings. But yeah, typical remediation is anywhere from $9,000 to $15,000. If no groundwater's impacted. If groundwater's impacted, you're looking at $20,000 to $30,000.
So let me ask you this. What if the person's not selling their home and they have an oil tank that they want to remove for one reason or another, and they don't have the money to pay for it? Is there something they can do about it?
Absolutely. So we have some programs now where we're going to be actually offering financing in-house. We have an outside financing company that we work with, but you have to have pretty excellent credit to apply for that. And we find that most of our clients just don't meet it. So we've coming out with an in-house financing deal where we'll be able to finance you for 5 years. So that's all the details aren't worked out with it yet, but probably first quarter of 2020 we'll be rolling that out. That'll be helpful for them. And if they want to sell, let's say it's a 5-year payout, they're into it for 3 years, they decide they want to sell, we would then get them an NFA letter at that point and get paid at closing. So we're trying to work, and we're coming up, we're seeing what all the problems are with this issue, with this industry, and we're just basically solving every one of them. For instance, insurance. There's one company right now that provides insurance for active tanks. We rolled out something about 4 years ago where we do a guarantee. So let's say you're representing a buyer and they want to buy the house. The seller has no money. We'll come in and probe around the tank, and then we offer them a 6-month guarantee, as I was saying before. So it's a short-term kind of insurance thing, right? So there's one company that offers a long-term plan where if you have an active tank, you're getting fuel delivered, and you're using the heating oil tank, and that transfers to a new buyer. So you probably come into that. It's called ProGuard. You probably run into it.
I've seen that.
So people feel comfortable with that. But the problem with that program is they make you stick with oil after 12 months. Like if you have a leak, they have a lot of little things, loopholes that they get out from under, some paying, essentially. I've had clients that pay for it for 15 years, and then they have no coverage because they convert to gas without telling them. And then so we're coming out with a program that's going to be basically essentially the same thing as what they're doing, but it's going to be a lot better. Like they cover only $100,000 if your tank leaks, only for first party. So if your tank leaks into groundwater, it's on you.
Oh wow!
So $100,000 is not a lot of money in this space. So they only cover up the first $100,000. They don't cover for groundwater, and they have all these loopholes where if you do something wrong, one little thing, then you don't cover you. Our program is going to be, we're thinking of rolling out to upwards of $250,000 of coverage, first party and third party, which is groundwater. So it's a very good coverage policy, and it would be transferable to the new owner, and you would not have to stick with gas. So all the issues of that plan, we're basically coming out with a better product for it. So we'll be rolling that out next year.
Very creative. I like it. So in closing, can you give us some tips for real estate agents or investors to look for when they go in and check out a house, maybe for their client or for themselves? Is there something that they should be wary of?
Well, yeah, it's hard to tell somebody, hey, look out for this or that. I mean, I can tell you look for lines in the wall and stuff like that. But here's what I like to tell people: if you're a realtor, you should become a tank expert. And let me explain what I mean. Like most realtors, as you know, they run for the hills. They see an oil tank, they don't even want to show the house.
Yeah,
they're like,
it has oil numbers.
Oh, it's got oil. They put a filter in. Don't even show me. I don't even want to see houses with oil tanks. My thing is now with all the programs we have, with payment at closing, with guaranteed soil samples, with fixed price remediations, all these things that we're rolling out, your agents to really become an expert in these types of houses. You could go on the MLS, filter for underground oil tanks, look for houses that are expired, the listings, and reach out to them. Hey, why didn't you sell? Most likely it's because of the tank. Maybe the tank was leaking, whatever the case is. Well, now we could come in and we could probe, we could fix prices, so they could become the expert. I was explaining to you a little earlier too about, we're doing a lot of work now with home style loans, 203K loans for the banks. The banks are coming to us now because they have people that want to buy these properties with this type of loan, mortgage, but they need a fixed price. They can't go with an open-ended contract.
Yeah.
So we're the only company in the state of New Jersey that will give you a true fixed price. So we're doing a lot of those work. So again, if your realtors find a house that can't sell because of the tank, well, now you have ways of structuring the deal, and you could find buyers, investors, or whoever to come in and get those deals.
So what you're saying, for those of you who don't understand what Teddy's getting at, is that when you get a renovation loan with a bank, they want to make sure that whatever you're accounting for is a fixed price. Usually with oil tanks, there is no fixed price.
Correct.
It's you roll the dice.
Yep.
But he's giving a guarantee on the price, which now allows your client to buy a home with oil tank contamination with an FHA, a home style, any kind of these loans that offer the renovation package. So that's new, because I've never heard of that before.
No,
and
it literally, since we've rolled this out, I mean, we've had banks calling us. I have people that are recommending us from these mortgage companies that are like, dude, you got to go to these guys. They'll give you a fixed price. And it's working out really well. I mean, it's a lot more work on our end because we got to deal with the paperwork end of it. Like, a lot more signatures and contracts they want you to sign, and this in writing and that in writing. But it's okay. We don't mind it. You know what I mean? So we work with them, and it's a good source for us for sure.
That opens up a lot of inventory for clients who can't find a house.
Exactly.
So it's good.
If the deal makes sense, and I could give you a price that the numbers all add up and make sense, then absolutely, it's a great way to buy a house.
So I guess what the real estate agents need to do is just re-educate their clients on oil tanks and how it could be remediated.
Absolutely.
That's good. I like it. So how can someone reach out to you and your company?
So simpletankservices.com is our website. We're on Facebook as well. Just check us out online, and you'll see. I mean, we have over 200 reviews on Google.
I'll give Teddy a review right now. When I met Teddy, it was on a job. So I had a tank company come out and do some testing, but they did it the way you said. They were out there with jackhammers trying to by hand trying to get samples, and they're like, we can't get deep enough. The ground's too hard. I was like, I'm getting the house cheap enough anyway. If it has some contamination, I'll buy it. So it turns out I have Ted come out to take the tank out, and when he takes it out, he finds contamination. I'm like, oh, I knew it.
Yeah.
And then the same day he took it out, he's like, you want it to clean up for you? We're here, might as well clean up. I'm like, yeah, why not? Go for it.
Save money.
I called my guy who sold me the house, and I told him, I was like, the guy's taking the tank out right now. He's like, what? He's taking it out right now, and he's cleaning it up? He never heard of such a thing because he does hundreds of oil tank remediations because he was an REO agent.
Okay.
So he came that same day to meet Ted because he couldn't believe it, and you cleaned it up, and you got it out of there. Yeah. And that's how we met Ted. We've been doing business ever since. So you can rely on Ted. He really does go above and beyond, and he does things no one else does. So normally somebody would have just backfilled it and then come back another day.
They want to charge you another day for the machine. I mean, why? You have all the equipment there.
And he's helping a client of ours right now, which she doesn't have the money to pay for the removal of the tank, and she's going to go and use one of his programs to pay at closing.
Yes.
So he's a real company, guys, and I stand by him. So thank you so much, Ted.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Appreciate you.
Awesome.
Thank you guys for watching. See you next time.